My name is Eli, and if you only remember one thing about me, let it be this. I never meant to become the villain in my own home. I only wanted to test the strength of a 45-year marriage, to see if the vows we whispered in our youth could still stand in the quiet storms of old age. So I told my wife I was going on a trip. I kissed her cheek at dawn, carried my suitcase across the porch, and drove away with a smile I didn't deserve. I wasn't heading out of town. I was circling the block, circling my doubts, waiting for the right hour to come home with flowers, with dinner, with proof that love could still surprise her. Instead, it surprised me. I parked a street over so the gravel wouldn't rat me out. The March air was soft and thin, the kind that carries every sound, birds arguing on a fence, a neighbor's screen door, the lonely sigh of an old wind chime. I held my breath at our back gate like a thief. The lock turned as easily as it had for decades. Funny how the familiar can feel foreign when you enter it with a lie in your pocket. Inside, the house smelled like jasmine and lemon oil. The bedroom was tidy as a chapel. My suitcase, my decoy, sat by the dresser as if it were an actor frozen mid-scene. On her vanity, one of her creams was missing. Another was turned sideways, cap open, like a mouth about to confess. That tiny, ordinary chaos tugged at a thread I'd been ignoring for months. People say the heart knows before the mind will admit it. Mine had been whispering to me in the strangest moments, when she laughed at something on her phone and turned the screen, when she bought a dress that didn't look like my wife but fit her like a secret, when she started saying, "I need my days," the way people say, "I need my oxygen." I told myself I was being dramatic, that we were just getting older. That love settles, it doesn't vanish. That routine is not the same thing as distance. The lies we tell ourselves are softer than the lies we tell others. They tuck you in. They stroke your hair. They keep you sleeping. I set the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. Red wine she liked, spices for a chili recipe I'd practiced 3 times, flowers wrapped in paper that whispered when I moved. I'd planned to cook slow, to let the scent rise, to have music playing so the house felt like it used to, warm, generous, assured. Instead, I watched the clock. For a clock. 6. Every minute swollen with what ifs. Her car wasn't in the garage. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The television spoke to an empty living room, a parade of reruns that used to make her laugh, now marching past me without meaning. By 8, worry had eaten its way through my pride. I called our daughter, Zoe, asked a careless question in a careful voice. She thought her mother was home. I called a friend of Grace's and got an answer so polite it felt rehearsed. I sat there with the wine, the flowers, the slow, heavy silence. When you love someone for this long, silence becomes a language. That night, it translated as a warning. I picked up her little checkbook, the one with notes and phone numbers on the sleeve. On the week I was out of town, a single word was written in her neat hand, art. Not a painting, not a class. A name. I don't know why my hands started to shake. Maybe because names have gravity. They aren't suspicions. They're anchors. I found a number penciled on the inside cover. I dialed. A man's voice answered, steady, older, civil. I hung up before the syllables could become a person. It's strange how betrayal doesn't explode. It accumulates. A glance. A late-night text. A canceled plan. A dress that doesn't belong to your history. Then one day it has weight and it drags the floor when you try to move. At dawn I did something I'm not proud of. I stopped being a husband and became an investigator. I asked my son to drive me to the city. I told him I needed help finding something I'd lost. That wasn't a lie, not really. We checked places no husband should have to check. Discreet front desks. Parking lots where no one makes eye contact. Side doors that open to hallways that smell like carpet cleaner and forgetfulness. We were told no, with faces that looked like yes. By afternoon, I was sitting in a small cafe across from a hotel I would later pretend I'd never noticed in my life. The coffee cooled. My hands didn't. I waited the way a man waits for test results, hoping to be called a fool, ready to be told the truth. When my wife's car pulled up, the world went quiet, the way theaters go quiet just before the curtain rises. She emerged from the passenger side, laughing at something I couldn't hear. A well-dressed man got out on the driver's side and touched her waist the way I used to when we were still made of springtime. They walked in together, easy, practiced, like they had rehearsed this entrance and liked how it felt. Some men storm. Some men beg. I counted to 30 with the steadiness of a welder waiting for metal to cool. Then I stood, paid for a coffee I hadn't touched, and crossed the street carrying a bouquet that had quit being flowers and started being evidence. At the desk, the clerk glanced at me and then at the elevator, as if she already knew which floor my questions were headed to. She didn't ask for names. She didn't ask for proof. Sometimes the truth wears such a familiar face you don't need ID. I took the stairs. When you are an old man with a breaking heart, stairs feel honest. Each step tells you what it costs to keep going. Outside the door, I heard her laugh again, but brighter than it had sounded in months. I raised my hand and knocked. The pause. Footsteps. The lock clicked. The door opened. There she was, the girl I married, wearing a stranger's smile. Behind her, a man with the kind of tidy hair you only keep if you have time for mirrors. The room smelled like their afternoon. Fresh. Occupied. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I said the first true sentence I had spoken since the lie on my porch. Grace, I came back early. Her hand flew to her throat. The man's name reached me before his handshake did. Arthur. So that was Art. For a long breath, none of us were husband, wife, or anything simple. We were three people standing at the edge of a story that would not forgive us for how it started. And somewhere between the bouquet slipping from my fingers and the first apology that wasn't meant for me, I understood the worst part hadn't happened yet. Not the hotel. Not the man. Not even the months of silence I'd mistaken for peace. No, the cruelest thing was still waiting on the other side of a sentence I hadn't heard. A sentence that would make me wish I'd actually taken that trip and never come back. Grace's name trembled on my tongue like a prayer I no longer believed in. For a moment, none of us spoke. The air inside that hotel room felt thick enough to drown in. She tried to smile, but it cracked halfway, like glass under heat. Eli, what are you doing here? Her voice carried the guilt of a woman who already knew the answer. I came back early, I said again, because it was the only truth left between us. Behind her, the man straightened his collar, composed but pale. His eyes darted between us, calculating the safest way to exist in this scene. He took a cautious step forward. Mr. Dixon, Don't, I cut him off, my voice low. Not yet. Grace moved aside, her hand trembling as she gestured for me to come in. The smell hit me first, her perfume, mixed with the faint sweetness of champagne. There were 2 glasses on the table, one still half full, lipstick on the rim. A hotel bed behind them, neatly made but not untouched. Every object in that room seemed to whisper one word: betrayal. Eli, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for years? That you turned our marriage into a Greyview visit on weekends? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of years, of love, of shared breakfasts, of children, of the quiet way she used to rest her hand on mine during Sunday dinners. All of it sat between us now, decaying in the stale air of a rented room. The man, Arthur, as I'd soon learn, cleared his throat. Mr. Dixon, I had no idea. I'm not talking to you, I snapped, eyes still locked on Grace. But he kept speaking as if honesty could soften sin. She told me you had passed away 2 years ago. I thought she was a widow. The words didn't hit immediately. They hung there, floating, waiting for my mind to stop protecting me from understanding them. A widow. I repeated. Yes, Grace whispered. That's what I told people here. The world shifted beneath me, the floor seemed to tilt. My heart didn't race, it stopped. So, I said slowly, tasting the bitterness, you killed me. You buried me in your stories, told strangers I was dead. Was that easier than telling the truth? Her tears started then, the kind that don't come from sadness, but from the shame of being caught. It wasn't like that, Eli. I just wanted something of my own again. Something separate from everything we built. I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to hurt me? She had erased me. Deleted 45 years of laughter, struggle, sweat, children, promises, all with one cruel sentence. My husband is dead. I turned to Arthur, whose face had gone ghost white. And you? You believed her? He nodded, grief and confusion mixing in his eyes. Yes. I met her at a teacher's conference. She said she'd lost her husband suddenly. I pitied her. We connected over that loss. Grace covered her face with both hands. Eli, I didn't plan for it to go this far. My laugh came out hollow, empty of joy. Grace, people don't accidentally fake a death. You didn't trip and fall into a lie this big. She dropped her hands, anger flickering now behind her tears. You don't understand. I gave my life to you, to that house, to the children, to the same town that never changed. I wanted to feel alive again. And so you had to kill me to do it? I had to be someone else, she whispered. The calmness in her tone was what broke me. Not the lie. Not the affair. But the peace in her voice, as if she had finally told the truth and could breathe again. Arthur stepped back, guilt painting his face. I'll leave, he said quietly. This isn't my place. I stopped him with a glare. No, you stay. You should see what kind of woman you're defending. Grace shot me a sharp look. Don't humiliate me. Humiliation. I said, the word choking in my throat. You killed me, Grace. I think humiliation is the least of your punishments. The bouquet I'd brought for her, those poor flowers that once meant hope, had fallen to the carpet, petals scattered between our feet like little corpses of affection. The wine bottle still sat in my truck, waiting for a dinner that would never happen. I took a long, steady breath. Why didn't you just ask for a divorce? Her eyes darted away. Because I didn't want to ruin the picture. The perfect marriage, the perfect family. Everyone looks up to us in Willow Creek. You're respected. I didn't want to destroy that. So instead, you destroyed the truth, I said. She didn't deny it. Arthur spoke again, his voice almost trembling. Grace, you lied to me. You lied to everyone. I know, she said. But at least now it's all out. Maybe it's time I stop living in two worlds. Her words sliced through the room, final and cold. Two worlds. One where I existed, one where I was already dead. I walked toward the door. Behind me, she said, Eli, please. Where are you going? To remember what being alive feels like, I said. And when I stepped into the hallway, something inside me cracked so deep it echoed. I wasn't angry anymore. Not yet. Anger would come later. First came the numbness, that slow, creeping frost that freezes everything it touches. I left the hotel without looking back. But her last words followed me like a ghost down every step of the staircase. Words so casual, so final, they burned into my bones. Eli, you were never supposed to find out. When I left that hotel, I thought the worst was behind me. I thought I'd already seen the betrayal in its purest form. The lies, the affair, the false widowhood. But I was wrong. The real pain doesn't come from the moment you're betrayed. It comes when you realize that the life you built, brick by brick, was founded on quicksand. It comes when the people who look up to you, your children, start asking questions you can't answer without breaking their hearts. That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't. The house that once smelled of Grace's cooking and laughter now felt haunted. Every wall would whisper her name. Every chair would remember her touch. I drove aimlessly through the dark roads of Mississippi, headlights cutting through the fog like truth cutting through denial. I ended up parked outside my son Jamal's house. The porch light was still on. He always left it on for me when I came by unannounced. I sat there for 10 minutes before I could move. How do you tell your child that the mother he adores killed his father, not in flesh but in memory? When he opened the door, his face changed from surprise to worry. Dad? What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be in Memphis? I looked him straight in the eye. Can I come in, son? My voice cracked. That was the first time he heard me sound old. Inside, his wife Nicole had just put the kids to bed. The scent of cocoa and bedtime lingered in the air, soft, innocent, everything my world no longer was. Jamal gestured for me to sit, but I couldn't. My hands trembled, my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape me. He noticed. Dad, what happened? He asked, stepping closer. Is Mom okay? I wanted to lie, just once more, to protect him like fathers do. But I'd had enough of lies for a lifetime. Son, I said quietly, your mother has been seeing another man. For years. The words came out like shards of glass. His face went blank, searching mine for a hint that I was joking. I wasn't. What? No, that's impossible. Mom wouldn't. She would, I interrupted. And she did. I told him everything. About the classes that never existed, the trips that were cover-ups, the name, Arthur, the hotel room. I even told him how she had told everyone she was a widow, how she'd buried me in her story so she could live another life. At first, Jamal didn't speak. He just stared at the floor. Then his fists clenched. I'll kill him, he said through his teeth. No, I said firmly. This isn't about him. He didn't know. Your mother lied to him too. He sank into a chair, shaking his head. How could she, after everything you two built together? I didn't have an answer. Sometimes betrayal doesn't have logic. It just happens because someone stops choosing you. The next morning, Zoe came by. Jamal had called her. He couldn't keep it inside. When she walked in and saw me sitting there, her face already knew something was wrong. Dad? What's going on? She asked. Why are you here? I didn't want to do it again. But the truth doesn't wait for your comfort. I told her the same story. She stood frozen, her lips parting, then trembling. That's not true, she said at first, like a child refusing bedtime. Mom wouldn't. She loves you. Loved, I corrected softly. Maybe she did once. Maybe she still does in her own way. But not enough to be honest. Tears rolled down Zoe's cheeks. So what now? What do we do? We don't do anything, I said. I do. I'm divorcing her. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Jamal looked at me with sorrow, Zoe with disbelief. Divorce was a word that didn't belong in our family. We were the Dixons, solid, old-fashioned, loyal. At least, that's what everyone thought. I saw in their faces what I'd felt in that hotel, the death of something sacred. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that began with my name and ended with sobs. I deleted it. I couldn't listen to her trying to dress her betrayal in the language of regret. By evening, the news had started spreading. Small towns have long memories and short secrets. By the time I drove to the metalworks the next morning, I could feel the eyes on me. Poor old Eli, I heard someone whisper near the gate. Did you hear what his wife did? Their pity cut deeper than any insult could. I threw myself into work, pounding steel until my arms ached, until the sound drowned out the noise in my head. Every spark from the forge looked like a piece of my past burning away. Jamal stayed close, watching me with quiet concern. Dad, he said gently one day, you can stay with us as long as you need. We'll take care of you. I smiled, though it felt like it belonged to another man. No, son. I'll be all right. I just need to remember who I was before all this. But remembering was hard. Every song on the radio, every cup of coffee, every Sunday morning was haunted by her absence. Grace had always been everywhere. In the flowers she planted, the curtains she chose, the meals she made. Now she was gone, but her ghost stayed behind. A week later, she came by Jamal's house. I didn't want to see her, but she came anyway. When I opened the door, she looked older, smaller, as if the weight of her choices had shrunk her. She tried to touch my arm. I stepped back. Eli, she said, voice trembling, please, let me explain. You already did, I replied coldly. Her tears came again. I was lonely. So was I said. But I stayed faithful. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she whispered something that froze my blood. You weren't supposed to come back that day. I looked at her in disbelief. You mean? Yes, she said softly. You were never supposed to see it. It was then I understood, not only had she betrayed me, but she had planned her lies so carefully, so completely, that my accidental return had ruined her perfect double life. That was when I knew, love doesn't die in one day. It rots in secret. And by the time you smell the decay, it's already too late. The morning after Grace came to see me, The sky itself seemed ashamed. Clouds hung low over Willow Creek, heavy and gray, like the whole town had overheard what she'd done. I used to love mornings here, the sound of roosters, the smell of wet soil, the echo of hammers from my shop. But now, every sound felt hollow. Familiarity had turned into a mockery of peace. When betrayal hits you, it doesn't scream. It whispers in every corner. I could feel it in the way people paused their conversations when I walked into the diner, the way they offered me coffee with too much kindness, as if I were a fragile old man whose heart had shattered beyond repair. Maybe they were right. It didn't take long for the story to spread. A woman in a small town can't fake her husband's death without the truth clawing its way out eventually. And when it did, Willow Creek devoured it. Gossip here doesn't walk, it gallops. Some pitied me. Some judged me. Some secretly enjoyed having something new to talk about between Sunday sermons. At Dixon Metal Works, my employees tried to act normal, but I could feel the tension. I caught them exchanging glances, whispering when they thought I wasn't listening. They respected me, sure, but even respect can't silence curiosity. Jamal stood by me like a rock, taking over most of the shop's work. Zoe stopped visiting for a while. She said she couldn't face people asking questions about her mother. I understood. She was trying to protect what was left of her dignity, even if it meant leaving me to face the whispers alone. The hardest part wasn't the gossip, it was the church. For 40 years, Grace and I sat in the same pew every Sunday. We sang hymns, held hands during prayer, hosted picnics, and helped raise money for families in need. Now, when I walked in alone, heads turned. Sister Gloria gave me that sympathetic smile, the one people give widowers. Only this time, I wasn't widowed. I was erased. One Sunday, the pastor spoke about forgiveness. His words were soft, gentle, like warm rain. Sometimes, he said, forgiveness isn't for the one who hurt you, it's for the one who was hurt. I sat there in silence, jaw clenched, staring at the Bible I could barely read anymore. Forgiveness? How do you forgive a woman who murdered your memory and called it love? The divorce papers came in the mail that week. I signed them without ceremony. 45 years of marriage reduced to ink on paper. I left the envelope on the table for Jamal to send off. My hands were steady, but my heart trembled like an old house in the wind. A few days later, Zoe came back to visit. She looked thinner, her eyes red from crying. "Dad," she said softly, sitting beside me on the porch, "I saw Mom." I said nothing. "She's living in Memphis now," she continued. "She sold her half of the house. She says she wants to start over." I stared out at the garden Grace once tended, her roses now overgrown and wild. "Start over," I muttered. "She's good at that." Zoe grabbed my hand. "She's sorry, Dad. She really is." I sighed. "Zoe, your mother was always good with words. But sorry doesn't bring the dead back. Not the real ones. Not the living ones she buried." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, touching the furniture she had chosen, the curtains she had sewn. Every inch of it was haunted. I realized then that I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed a small suitcase, took my father's old Bible and left. I rented a modest place near the shop, 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, nothing fancy. It felt like starting life again at 70, except this time without the illusion of forever. The first week alone was brutal. Every sound in that small house echoed too loud, the creak of the floorboards, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator. Loneliness is a noise you can't turn off. But as the days passed, something unexpected began to happen. The silence started to heal me. It became my companion, not my punishment. Each morning, I woke early, brewed coffee, and walked to the shop before sunrise. The sound of the hammer on steel was my new heartbeat. The smell of burning iron replaced the smell of her perfume. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. But peace doesn't last long in a place that remembers. One afternoon, as I was closing up, an old friend, Henry Miller, stopped by. He stood at the door awkwardly, holding his hat. "Eli," he said, voice uncertain, "you know, folks are saying she's back in town this weekend. For a visit." My stomach turned. "For what?" He shrugged. Some event for retired teachers at the school. You gonna go? I shook my head. No. I've buried her once already. That night, I sat alone on the porch of my new house, the crickets singing in the dark. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the laughter, the fights, the children, the quiet evenings watching the sun dip below the trees. I realized that love doesn't vanish when trust does. It lingers, wounded, begging for closure. So I made a decision. Not to forgive her, not yet, but to face her one last time. Not for her sake. For mine. If peace was ever going to return to my heart, I had to look into the eyes of the woman who'd killed my past and tell her that she no longer had power over my future. I didn't know it then, but that final meeting would bring one last secret, one so dark, it would change everything I thought I knew about Grace, about my marriage, and about the kind of man I really was. Because sometimes, when you dig into someone else's lies, you uncover truths you wish had stayed buried forever. The night before I went to see Grace, I barely slept. The wind outside clawed at the window, rattling it like an old ghost begging to be let in. I sat in my chair, staring at the packed bag on the floor, not much inside, just the essentials. A clean shirt, my Bible, and an old photograph of our family from happier times. Jamal had begged me not to go. Zoe had cried quietly, afraid I'd reopen wounds that had just begun to heal. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. Some stories demand an ending, even if it hurts to write it yourself. The next morning, I drove to Memphis. The same road I'd once taken with laughter in the passenger seat now stretched ahead like a confession waiting to be made. Every mile carried a memory. The diner we'd stopped at on our honeymoon, the old gas station where she used to buy those caramel candies she loved. By the time I reached the city, the air felt heavier. My heart was calm but hard, like steel that had been hammered one too many times. Grace's new apartment was in a modest brick building. Nothing fancy, just clean and small. When she opened the door, she looked startled, then resigned as if she'd been expecting this day all along. Eli, she breathed, her voice low. I didn't think you'd ever come. I wasn't planning to, I said. But I need answers. She stepped aside, letting me in. The place was neat, almost too neat. A single framed picture of her grandchildren sat on the shelf. No trace of Arthur. No trace of our life together. Not even our wedding photo. It was like she'd scrubbed me out of existence again. We sat at a small table by the window. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "You look thinner." "And you look older," I replied. "I guess guilt doesn't sleep easy." She flinched but didn't argue. "You want the truth," she said finally, folding her hands. "Fine. You deserve that much." "I already know the truth," I said bitterly. "You lied, you cheated, you built another life." She shook her head. "No, Eli. That's only half of it." Her tone was steady, calm, too calm. It unnerved me. "Then go ahead," I said. "Finish killing what's left." She took a deep breath. "When I told Arthur I was a widow, it wasn't just to hide the affair. I wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" I laughed. "By pretending I was dead?" "Yes," she said, eyes glistening. "Because someone believed you really were." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She turned away, staring out the window as if the past was reflected in the glass. "Do you remember the flood in '95? She asked. "When your shop went under?" "Of course I do," I said. "Half the town helped rebuild." She nodded. "And do you remember the loan we took from the city to rebuild? The one in your name?" "Yes, what about it?" Tears rolled down her cheeks now, silent and steady. "It wasn't paid off. Not legally. I thought it was, but someone used your name again years later, forged your signature to take another loan in 2017. I didn't know until the bank called. They said there'd been fraud. They said you could be charged." I blinked. "Grace, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," she whispered, "I thought I could fix it before you found out." I panicked. I went to Memphis to meet the man who offered to handle it. Arthur wasn't supposed to be part of any of this. He worked for the state finance office. I met him to plead for more time, and he helped me. He told me he could clear the paperwork quietly. And he did. I stared at her, confusion and rage mixing inside me. So you fell in love with him while trying to cover up fraud in my name? It wasn't like that, she said quickly. It started with desperation, not love. I lied because I was scared. I thought I'd ruined your business, your reputation. I didn't want you to know. But you didn't just hide the loan, I said slowly, voice shaking. You killed me in your story. You told him I was dead. She nodded miserably. It was the only way to close the file. If the borrower was deceased, the case couldn't move forward. Arthur helped make it look legitimate on paper. It started as paperwork, Eli, but then it became something else. He was kind to me. He listened. You had your forge, your work, your pride, and I had no one. I told myself it was harmless. But it wasn't. I stood, pacing the room, my pulse pounding in my ears. So all those years, all those trips, it wasn't just about him. It was about keeping this secret. Yes, she said, trembling. And by the time it was all over, I didn't know how to stop lying. The story of your death had already spread in Memphis. I didn't know how to take it back without losing everything. I stared at her, the woman I'd loved, the woman I thought I'd known. I could barely recognize her anymore. You didn't protect me, Grace, I said quietly. You destroyed me. You made me a ghost while I was still breathing. Her voice broke. I know. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life. I took a deep breath, looking out her window at the gray Memphis skyline. For the first time, I realized that her lies weren't born out of hatred. They were born out of fear. Fear of losing control, of losing her image, of losing the life we'd built. But fear can be more dangerous than evil. It kills slower, but it kills everything it touches. When I turned to leave, she reached out and touched my hand one last time. Eli, she whispered, do you still hate me? I paused. No, I said. I don't hate you, Grace. But I don't know who you are anymore. And as I walked out that door, I felt something heavy lift from my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the weight of confusion, gone at last. For the first time since that March afternoon, I wasn't angry. I was empty. And sometimes, emptiness is the first step toward peace. I drove home from Memphis in silence. The road stretched endlessly before me, the hum of the tires the only sound that kept me company. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a dull ache that reached somewhere deep, past words, past thought. The woman I'd loved for 45 years hadn't just betrayed me, she'd buried me to protect me. Or maybe to protect herself. At that point, I wasn't sure it mattered. When I reached Willow Creek, the afternoon light was soft and golden. I parked outside my shop and sat there for a long while, staring at the faded sign that still read Dixon Metal Works and Son. The name felt heavier now, but also sacred. That shop had survived floods, storms, and decades of sweat. Maybe it could survive this too. Maybe I could. Inside, Jamal was closing up. When he saw me, he froze. Dad, you all right? I nodded slowly. I'm done running, son. He hesitated, then hugged me, something he hadn't done since he was a boy. Whatever she said, don't let it eat you up. You've got too much heart for that. That night, I stayed in the workshop long after he left. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and iron. I lit the forge, the flames dancing like old memories, and watched as the steel began to glow red. I'd learned long ago that metal changes shape only when it's under heat. Maybe people are the same. Maybe pain isn't punishment. Maybe it's the fire that refines what's left of you. As the metal hissed and bent under my hammer, I realized something. For years, I had lived for others. For Grace, for the children, for reputation, for peace. But this time I would live for me. Not out of bitterness, but out of freedom. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and took a walk through town. The streets were quiet, dew still clinging to the grass. People stared, but I didn't care anymore. Their whispers had no power over me now. Every step I took was a step away from who I used to be. At the old churchyard, I saw someone tending the garden, Sister Gloria, one of Grace's closest friends. She looked up, surprised to see me. Eli, she said softly. I heard you went to see her. I did, I replied. And? She told me the truth, I said. All of it. Gloria nodded slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free, she said. It just stops you from dying in the dark. Those words hit deep. I realized I didn't need revenge, and I didn't need pity. I needed purpose. Something to pour myself into. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself back into work. Jamal and I rebuilt old machines, took new orders, and even taught some neighborhood kids the basics of welding. I started telling them stories. Not the sad ones, but the kind that make you laugh and learn at the same time. Somehow, in teaching them how to mold steel, I was teaching myself how to bend without breaking. Zoe visited one Sunday with her children. They filled the shop with laughter, and for the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. When she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "Mom asked about you." I nodded. "Tell her I'm still alive." That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the stars flicker through the darkness. Life had burned me, but it hadn't melted me. I thought about Grace, about the lies, about everything that had been lost. And yet, under all the pain, there was something else. A strange peace, small but growing, like the first spark in cold ashes. Because maybe the truth doesn't destroy you after all. Maybe it just forges you into something stronger than you were before. It's been 5 years since that day in Memphis. 5 years since the woman I thought I knew best became a stranger holding my past in her trembling hands. But time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. These days, my mornings are simple. I wake before dawn, brew my coffee, and walk down to the shop with my grandson, Isaiah. He's 14 now, curious, full of life, asking 1,000 questions a minute. I teach him the same way my old mentor once taught me. Steel is like people. It bends, it breaks, but in the fire, it finds its shape again. He laughs when I say that, but I can see the spark in his eyes. The same spark I once had. Maybe that's what legacy really is. Not what you build, but what you pass on. Some afternoons, Zoe brings her kids around, and Jamal and I sit outside watching them play. The air feels lighter now, the kind that fills your lungs instead of weighing on your heart. Grace lives her quiet life in Memphis. We don't speak much, just the occasional message through the children. She says she's found peace. Pray she has. Because I have too, though it came dressed as loneliness first. You see, healing doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It comes like a slow thaw after a long winter. One moment, you're sure the cold will never leave. The next, you realize the ice has melted, and you're standing in the warmth again. Last month, I went fishing at the same pond where Grace and I once took the kids. The water was still, and for a while, I sat there talking to the reflection of the man I used to be. I told him I was sorry, not for what she did, but for how long I let her shadow darken my days. Because bitterness, my friends, is a second death. And I'd already died once in her story. I refused to die again in my own. When the sun set that evening, I realized something I'd never said out loud. I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because I did. Forgiveness isn't about freeing the person who hurt you. It's about freeing the person they left behind. Now, when I sit on my porch, I see the world differently. I don't see betrayal, I see survival. I don't see what was taken, I see what's still mine. My children, my work, my breath, my peace. That's what no one can steal. And to anyone listening, maybe you've been lied to, maybe you've been forgotten, or maybe you're still waiting for someone to apologize. Don't let their choices bury you. Stand up. Become your own forge. Because no matter who broke you, you still get to decide what you become. Speech balloon, tell me in the comments, my friend, have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it? Did it make you stronger, or did it set you free? I want to hear your story. Thumbs up if this old man's words touched your heart. Click that like button. It helps more than you know. Television, subscribe to the channel because every week I share stories that remind us we can rise again, even from the ashes. Dove, and if you're still carrying a wound tonight, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it'll light their way the same way it once lit mine. I'm Eli Dixon, and this is the truth I learned the hard way. Life will break you. Love will test you. But only forgiveness will set you free.